Hello, everybody, and it's been a while, but it's also really quite cool to be back. And I'm gonna admit, I've just been sitting here kind of dancing to that music that I managed to find on what was the platform called? Upbeats, I believe, which is free as long as you say what the license is for an amount of tracks. So I thought that makes a change from just being silent at the start, and it kind of matches my How do you say that? I still have severe brain fog, but we'll get into that one in a minute. But it matches my artwork. Oh, and I see we have people in the chat room. We have Jessica and we have Matthias. Hello, both of you. Thanks so much for joining me. Um, so, what am I going to be doing today? It's going to be a short stream, just because that's all I can cope with right now. But I just want to start off with a little bit of, what's been going on and why did I do the stream with Amy Kapanek at NDC London last year and then just disappear? Well, for anybody who knows me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you probably know that I've had some health issues that have kind of put me completely on my back. I haven't worked full time in nearly a year, and it comes down to 2022 when I was visiting the UK for a conference there, which I'm not gonna mention the name of because I don't think it's their fault. I got COVID, and I had to stay with my mum for 2 weeks while I recovered. I wasn't actually that ill. It was, I was tired, I had a runny nose, and I had a sore throat. And in a few days, the runny nose and the sore throat went. My energy never returned. Now, I just assumed that I needed to exercise, to get back into shape. You've had this illness, it's knocked you on your back, you just gotta get up and you gotta push through, and you gotta go for it. Well, I did that, and I did it for a year. I started running no matter how hard it was. I always needed to take a lie down after my run, but I did manage to get up to 5K. I did loads of conferences in 2022. I adored it. It was a hectic but fantastic year. And then 2023 comes around. I went to, my favorite conference, Sweden, in Sweden. I wasn't feeling great, but I was testing negative. And then whilst I was in Sweden, I was asked to do .NET Front End Day. I really felt ill on that day, still testing negative. And, I've actually watched back the video, recently, and I can't believe how well I hid it, but I was really quite ill that day. Flew back home, was tired, went to bed, and then I was desperately ill for about 3 or 4 days, and I've just never recovered. I've been diagnosed with long COVID, with chronic fatigue syndrome, and with POTS. You stand up and you get dizzy. And I'm currently under treatment programs to try and aid that recovery. So I'm back at work 4 hours a day at the moment. It's extremely tiring. I'm starting to do a couple of conferences, which I am it's just so nice to be back in that group of people. Seriously, speakers are, some of the best groups of people in the world. And then I need to try okay, somebody in the chat, how can I get rid of people saying spam to my thank you, Jess. That's very nice. Jess can look after my channel for me. She's really nice. Um, so yeah, I've started to go back to a few conferences. It has been awesome to see people again. It's still really tiring. So pleased that it's rated, but I'm not doing another flyaway conference until at least the summer. I've learnt my lesson there. So instead of doing flyaway conferences, I wanted to get my channel back up and running because it's just been far, far too long. And I've got things that I want to do. And well, getting onto the channel actually gives me a time to be able to sit down and look at some of the projects I want to do and see how we can get them moving forward. So that's kind of the plan. I'm starting to speak again, done a couple of conferences, emceed a couple of conferences. That's also so much fun, but exhausting. And over the coming months, I'm going to contact some of the local meetups and see if I can do some local speaking. Because one, I want to get back into that anyway. It's I love meeting the local developers. You always have really good interactions. And two, it's anything within 2 hours by car. I think I can cope with without knocking myself on my back too much. So the plans for the coming months. What do I want to do on this channel? Well, one, expectations. I am not going to be doing more than once every 2 weeks, I think. I think that's a good way to ramp up and get working on this. And they're all gonna be reasonably short streams, that hopefully I can record whilst I'm doing them and also turn into some, YouTube tutorials as I go along. And I've got a few projects that I wanna pick up. One of them we're gonna be looking at in a minute, and I'm about to really embarrass myself. And that is, I wanna write a .NET SDK for my domain name provider. I use it in one of my talks, and I'd like to kind of make that full-fledged, fully operational, make it open source, get it out onto Nugget. And because the domain provider has a couple of SDKs, none for .NET, obviously by language. So we need to resolve that and get something working there. I'm also going to be working on a simple SVG generator, and I'm actually doing that for my work. We generate Word documents and we put graphs into those Word documents. And you can get all sorts of graph generators. They're fantastic. They don't quite have the functionality that we need. So it's like, okay, it's an SVG. Can't be that hard. So we're going to write one. It's not going to be this major, impressive commercial piece of software. Hopefully, it's something that we're going to be able to use. And again, I'm going to build the core of that that doesn't contain any IP from my office in the open, but put it on GitHub, so other people can see it, learn from it, and if anybody's got experience from there and wants to join me, let me know, and we can see what collaboration we can do. Then, static web apps. Of course, static web apps. Static web apps is my thing. I'm gonna be working on, the next edition of my book this year. We're gonna update it for .NET 9, and there's a lot changed in the time that I've been too ill to literally do anything, and so I'm gonna be playing with some of the new things there that I should have been doing over the last year and a half, getting up to speed with all of the awesome new features, so the data API, and also taking a look at what we can do when you go from the free tier to the paid tier. That's how a lot of people are gonna be using it, of course, if you're inside of an office environment, that's not gonna go. Okay, so my microphone's not quite set up right. Let's move it a bit closer and see if that helps. Sorry, is that better or is my new machine causing issues already? I really need to get the headset mic sorted, but I've not got all the cables on the desk yet to get that one working. Okay, well, yeah, we can hope for the best. Is it understandable or is it really out of it? If I look at my input, yes, it looks fairly stable. If it's understandable, then I'm gonna carry on, otherwise I can switch to a different mic and it'll just be oh, no, I can't switch to a different mic. I'm not working on my laptop, I don't have another microphone anymore. Okay, it's understandable. That's good, we can continue then. But yes, I'm gonna be playing with the other things that we can do in a static web app, including, what we can do in pipelines, the different types of backends that we can use, and trying to get some knowledge about that shared out there. And finally, because I've said I'm not gonna be doing much, and I've already gone through 3 things that I wanna do in the coming months. But finally, I want to work on building a kind of reference Azure system. So what we're gonna be doing there is coming up with some kind of scenario, and we're gonna be using lots of different Azure resources to try and spin this thing to life and see how we can get things to communicate with each other and try and speak to a few of my friends and get some best practices in there as well. And again, turn that into a little bit of a series. So that's all the plans that I want to get done over the coming months. What I want to do today, and it may be quite a short stream, we'll see, is I want to look at an application that I made too long ago, talk about the bad things I did, and then look at the future of it. And it is that interface or the SDK for my DNS name provider. So let me switch to my screen and camera view. Yay! Look at that. I can still remember how to use the stream deck. Is that visible? That looks a little bit small on my second monitor. Is that visible? Shall I zoom in a bit more? And this, as you can see, is that old. I don't even have that version of .NET installed anymore. And I started with all of the best intention because, of course, we start everything with the best intentions, don't we? What I wanted to do was make the SDK from the start, and I wanted to build it in such a way that I could use it in my talk. Now, the talk that I use this in is my static web app enterprise talk. I make a custom domain inside of a pipeline for the static web app, and in order to do that, you have to set a DNS record for that domain. I was like, fine. There's an API for my DNS name provider. We'll do this. We'll do it properly. I ran out of time. I quickly threw it together because it's just a temporary thing, isn't it? And there's the title of what we're talking about today. Temporary code is never temporary. We are trying to assume that if we do something temporary, we're going to come back and fix it later. But of course, we don't. Because once something's public, it's no longer temporary code. You are now using this in production, and you have less of a reason to come back and fix it. So that's something that we should always keep in our mind. So aside from the fact that we're not like using the proper version of .NET for this, we'll see how I'm feeling by the time we've gone through the code and the plans for the future. Um, we might update this to .NET 8. I might do that in the next stream. But what we have in here is a DLL, which is my Portland DNS. Guess which DNS name provider I'm using? I have a making app. Now, this is something that I got from G. Paul Hill on Twitter. I love his content. He comes out with some quite cool stuff. And one of the things that he was saying is in order to test what he does frequently, if he's building something like DLL or something like that, he'll do a making app so that he can just very quickly run it and see that things are doing what he's expecting them to do. I know you can do this in tests as well, of course, but this is a nice full-fledged thing. And actually, this making app, this is what I'm using in my talk in order to set my DNS name, which is also a bad idea. This isn't supposed to be used in that way. I'm just abusing it because it's available. And then we have the tests, and honestly, I don't even remember writing these tests, so I'm not sure what code we are about to see. And that's where the embarrassment comes in. I haven't got a clue how I wrote this. It's too long ago. So we have a number of models. So we have our get model, and this is all taken from what we need from Portland. So we have the API key and our secret key in there. And I believe we use that in the headers, possibly. Oh, no, that's just the base of every record, isn't it? We'll have a look at the API in a second. Surprise code! Yes, absolutely. It's, you know that feeling when you're looking at code and thinking, "Oh, who wrote this?" And then you figure out it was me? I'm the only one who's ever written this, so I guess that's definitely me. And it's all starting to come back. So these fields here, you have to include these with every request that you make to the API. And so everything's going to be inherited from this request. So we have a CNAME record request, and that, yeah, pretty much does what it says it does. This is how we can create CNAME records, which is what I use inside of my talk. I don't know why I put that inside of the record type. I have an idea that I put this one in there because I thought we just need to quickly get it running and then we'll fix it. And I got it running and didn't fix it. Temporary code is never temporary. Then we have our DNS record. I think this is if you're trying to find out what DNS records are available for a particular. No, it's not because this isn't inherited from that record type. I know that I do a call to the API in order to get a list of the records that are available. If it already exists, we don't need to be created. I guess we're going to find that later on. The record response, that one kind of speaks for itself. Okay, so we have the status and we have the list of DNS records there. Have to see how this one's used in a second. And we have some shared records here, and that's our API secrets. And I was at least good enough, the API secrets in the API key, not inside of my source code. I did that correct on the start because let's not share our API keys in GitHub, shall we? And then we have one class, DNS name management. And in here we have our client and our secrets that we pass in. And yeah, this probably shouldn't be a client. This should probably be a factory. We're going to be doing this probably later. We can create a domain if it doesn't already exist. And for this, we do multiple calls. So we get our DNS records, and if we find that, then we just output to the console that this domain already exists. That one kind of makes sense. If it does not exist, then we create the records that we want. Now, I have a thing here checking what this type is. This should probably be changed into a switch at some point because there's lots of different records that we can create. Again, this was just quick code that wasn't meant to live for a long time. Then we can edit our records. That kind of makes sense. And our request is just simply interesting. How does that edit the request? Oh, okay. We're gonna have to look at that one in the API of Porkbun in a minute, and then we can create our records and get the DNS records. So the two that we were using earlier. So that's all we've got so far. Now you can do a lot more with Portland, and like I said, I'm gonna be expanding this in the future. And then my program, we set our client to Portland API JSON v3. We get the secrets from our options. I've passed that in on the command line in order to try and keep that a little bit safe. And all I'm doing for this making app at the moment is getting DNS records just to check that the things flow through. What I want to do to this making app at some point is to just have it something that's running where I can select the different options that I want to change, just a little interface in order to do this. And the command line arguments, now I'm using a package for this. I'm using command line parser, but if I remember correctly, there's something built into .NET 8 that I should possibly be looking at instead. And that's something else that we're going to be investigating as we go through updating this application. And for the command line parser, you have to have you have to say what options you have available. And here I pass in my API key, the secret, subdomain, and the host name that I want to create, and it does everything for me. And as you can see, I'm limiting everything to stacy.cloud, which is one of the domains that I own. Shall we see what tests I wrote? I don't hold huge hopes for this. We do a CNAME request. What was I doing here? Okay, right, because when I make a CNAME request, I do some checking to make sure that we're not doing anything bad. So that's what my tests are doing here. I can check that it doesn't throw arguments for valid things. I can check it does throw arguments for invalid things, and that's as far as I got. So we're going to be changing that. We're going to be adding um, more tests as we go. And I'm going to be honest, I kind of think we're probably going to be rewriting this a little bit more than just updating it. The reason why I want to do that is I also want to use something else from G. Paul Hill that he mentioned on his blog a while ago, microspikes, which is trying to do test first development. Huge believer in test first development. But if you don't know what you need to do for your test, do a microspike. It can be 5 minutes, it can be an hour, it's whatever you need. And the important thing about a microspike is the only thing to take out of it is knowledge. So if you get something that's working, you take that knowledge of how you got it working, of how you need to build your code, and then you build it deliberately using that test first approach. So I'm probably going to be rewriting it using that at some point in the future. How are we doing? A few more minutes. Let's have a look at the API first. So I'm just going to open the browser and bring over the Portland API, which I have to log into. I don't need to do that yet. Okay, I just want to make sure I don't open it in a page that kind of gives away my API keys. That would be bad. Okay, so here's our API, the things that we can do. We can get an overview. We can get our domain pricing. We see how we need authentication. There's some example code, but I don't think that counts as .NET. And we can run all of these commands via the API. So this is what I want to implement over time. So let's have a look through each of these ones individually. So we have our domain pricing, and this one is really simple. You don't need to be logged in for this. So if we go to pricing, we can just get back a list of all the prices available, or all the prices for the different domains. Now, this takes a while to run because this is quite a huge response. Um, can be useful, I guess, if you really want to interpret this. It's not something I'm ever going to use, but it's not to say that it's not something that I should be implementing, especially if I want to take it outside of just my use case. So that's one of the ones that we can implement. How we authenticate that one, I have in there, and I guess we can test that with. Um, Now you do put everything into the payload. You don't add a header, but I seem to recall in the past you could actually move it into the header. That's something that we're going to play with and see what works and what doesn't work. And I know that my voice probably just took back because I turned my head and it all went quiet inside of my earpieces. Sorry. Then we have the errors that we get back. That's all fine. Okay, that's interesting. So anything other than 200 is an error, of course, and it will also be indicated in the status element of the JSON. So does that mean that you get a 400 back, but you also get a JSON response as well? Let's test that one. Get domain servers. Is that a get or is that a post? Let's see what response we get for this one, shall we? And then we'll go back at the top and carry on working our way through the list. Must use a post. Okay, fair enough. So I don't have Postman open right now, so we'll look into that one more when we need to. So we can update our domain servers. Um, Again, it's not something I'm going to be using, but it's definitely something that we're going to implement. And it's just as easy as adding this NS to our, or this NS object to our request and get it back. Work. We can implement that one. Get the domain name servers. So there we're going to get a list of all the domain name servers that we are using. This one I think is going to be useful, listing all of the domains. I think this is if you are using this SDK in order to manage your domain, then I can imagine that you're going to want a list of your domains back. So this might be one of the first ones that we implement when we get going. And there, yeah, we just get a list of domains back with some information about them that we'll look at later and see how we can, yeah, use that in a separate calling app as we need. We can add a URL forward. So that's nice. We can say whether or not it's temporary, whether or not it's permanent, include some wildcard paths. That's going to be quite useful if you're changing your domain and you need to point things to a new location. Get the forwardings that you have in place. Also useful, of course, if you're going to be able to set it, then you want to be able to get it and deleting it. So I think as we're going down, I think we can like, see some classes coming out of this. So we're going to have a URL forward class that allows us to do the get, add, delete. And do we have an edit in there as well? Or get, add, delete? That's going to be one of the classes we're going to be building. Then we have the ones that I am using inside of my talk. So we have the DNS create record. So we're adding their subdomain that we want to include, unless we're going to be using a text domain. the type of records, and we can access all of the different records that we have available to us. The content, so for example, the C name, is gonna point to the host name of my static web app when I'm, doing that in my talk. We get very simple responses back, just the ID of the record. Then you can edit, which I believe I possibly yeah, I do that in my talk. In case I've already created something under that subdomain and I wanna change it, um, then I will edit the record rather than deleting it and recreating it. Either way, even if I've not set up my talk properly for some unknown reason, it should always work for us. Of course, it's always an issue if you do that in your talk because the time to live for these records can sometimes be just a little bit too long. And DNS records can take time to propagate as well. But I think this is gonna be a nice one to implement as well. How are we doing? We're about two-thirds of the way down. Edit the records by the domain, the subdomain, and the type. So we just have different ways of accessing it to edit it there. Deleting it, because obviously we do need to delete it as well. Get all of the records. That is the one that I'm using in the talk to check to see whether or not this record already exists or not. Do it by subdomain and type. And retrieving your SSL bundle in order to get all of your SSL keys out of your domains. So this is something that we're going to be implementing, let's say, over time. It's probably going to take a few weeks, more than a few weeks, to get all of this done properly. Ow. I apologize for deafening all you there. I deafened myself too. That's going to be the first thing that we are going to kick off. So since I've got a few minutes left before I want to start, must admit I'm already starting to feel it. So it's definitely not going to be the longest um, stream in the world. It's just a nice one trying to get back. Should we just try and see whether or not we can get all of this running as .NET 8 and see whether or not it compiles it? Yeah, I might actually fix the warnings too. Okay, so we've got some errors. That kind of makes sense. And we possibly need to clean this, do we? Because I definitely have .NET 8. It's nice when things go simply, isn't it? Okay, let's see what Nugget packages need updating. We'll do all of those. Like I said, it has been an absolute age since I've done this, and of course, we all read that, didn't we? Because you always read these things before you close it. Wow, that made my new computer really, decide to kick off again. I love my new computer. I'm hoping it's working well for the streaming and everything's readable on the screen. It's sometimes a little bit loud, and I definitely need to get my other microphone working for the next stream because this is in the way. Oh, I need to tune it better so that I can have it more out of the way and not disappear. So, we have our everything running. Shall we see whether or not our tests work? Where's my test explorer? Why is my test explorer opened in a different screen? Wow, 6 tests, and they all run in 50 milliseconds because, of course, they do. What else do you need? Okay, let's push that one up to GitHub. .NET 8 and updated Nugget. I guess I would do that off stream. You can tell it's a brand new computer, can't you? Every time you get a brand new computer and you start working on it, or you reinstall it and you start working on it, you always forget to do some things in the process, and you only ever find them when, you try and do something, and obviously it happens when you're live on stream, and it's like, "Yeah, you've not set your username and email, have you?" Never mind, I'll do that one off stream, but at least we've got everything up to .NET 8 now, and off stream, what I'm gonna do is really try and figure out a plan for how we're gonna attack this, and in 2 weeks' time, I think, dates in my head, in 2 weeks' time, we'll actually make a start on that, and we'll have a proper plan of action, and it won't be me winging it and trying to stay awake, uh, and get working on some code. Now, I'm gonna be honest, that was a much shorter stream than I actually had in mind for today, but I can feel my eyes going. I've kind of done everything I wanted to do today, so for me, this has been kind of semi-successful getting back onto a streaming platform, and I hope to see you all in a couple of weeks. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.